What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Guiding Keys, the story of Kingdom Hearts, presented by the Unlockables podcast. As always, my name is Eric. I am your host, your guide through the wonderful world of Kingdom Hearts and through the wonderful mind of series creator and director Tetsuya Nomura. It means so much to me that you are here, wherever, whenever in time and space you may be located, to check out the show, check out what is going on in the world of video games, or in the case of this mini-series, check out what is going on in the world of Kingdom Hearts. This is our first episode post Kingdom Hearts 3. We are finally past the last largest entry in the Kingdom Hearts series, and I would say with this one being Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, we are in the home stretch. We only have Kingdom Hearts Dark Road and Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory to talk about before we wrap up the Guiding Keys series, at least until we get any news or a release of Missing Link or a release of Kingdom Hearts 4. Guiding Keys will be concluded until that time, because I will have told the entirety of the Kingdom Hearts story in as much detail as I possibly could have, and I will have attempted to make that story make sense in as much detail as I possibly could have. But like I said at the top, today we are going to be talking about Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, and immediately, once again, I have to apologize because, sure enough, as Guiding Keys has done several times as I've worked on it, it's proven to make me a liar once again, because at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, I foolishly said that we only had 2 more episodes to go. One episode was going to be on Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, and one episode was going to be on Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. Well, sure enough, once again, as I started doing my notes for Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, the notes grew to a point where I've been doing this long enough now that I can know, based on how fast I talk, how many pages of notes will correlate to about what length of an episode. And I'm already way past the point where the number of pages of notes I have for this game exceeds the 2-hour mark. So I think I'm going to split Kingdom Hearts Dark Road into 2 parts, and it'll look a little something like this. In this first part that you're listening to today, I'll do my usual introduction. I'll give you a little bit of background information on the game. I'll go into some of my thoughts. I'll give you a little bit of a development history and what I think about the gameplay. And then as far as the story goes, which is like the part that's the meatiest part of all of my episodes, the way Kingdom Hearts Dark Road works is it's divided into 8 episodes along with like a closing episode. So I guess you could say technically 9, but there's like 8 main episodes and a post-credits epilogue that sheds a little bit more light on everything that we saw. So Kingdom Hearts Part 1 will be the usual introductory information, and as far as the story goes, we'll talk about episodes 1 through 4. That'll get us like halfway through the story, and I think it's a good point where we can stop and have a little bit of a cliffhanger as to like what's going on in this story. And then in the second part, we'll do episodes 5 through the epilogue. And then at the end of that, I'll go through some talking points and try and tie things up and wrap things up and make sense of the information that we are told in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. As I've alluded to before, Kingdom Hearts Dark Road is going to be the story of Xehanort's youth when he grew up, his time training as a Keyblade wielder with his friend Ericus. So we'll get to see Master Xehanort's upbringing, and the reason this is called Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, spoiler, is because we know that at the end of it all, Xehanort was walking a dark road up until the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, where Ericus finally convinced him to just give this up and just hey, it's over. This has gone far enough. Like, Sora beat you. Just give it up. So we get to kind of see all of the things in Xehanort's life here that led to him becoming the person that we faced off against in the main Kingdom Hearts series. It's interesting. I have some interesting thoughts on it. So I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and start diving in to Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. Kingdom Hearts Dark Road is the 12th game in the Kingdom Hearts series, released on June 22nd, 2020 on iOS and Android as a part of the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross second rebrand. This is when it officially became Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. I remember first it was Kingdom Hearts Unchained, then it was like Unchained Key, and then it was Union Cross. And those went through a couple of rebrands there when it came over from the browser-based game that it was originally. It's kind of unclear all the parties involved in Dark Road's creation as terms of like who developed it, but since it was basically an extension of the Union Cross app, which means if you selected the Union Cross app on your smartphone, you could either play Union Cross the gacha game, or you could play Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, which was this more singular experience that had some gacha elements to it. We'll talk about that in a second here. So I would have to assume that it was most likely developed by Square Enix in collaboration with Bitgroove, since Bitgroove helped with the mobile version of Union Cross. But as I was watching the credits of the game roll, Success was mentioned as well. And if you remember, Success was the studio that helped with the browser-based version of the game. And I don't know if just because like the whole game was based on what Success had originally done that they mentioned them in the credits, that Success was mentioned in the credits, but I did not see Bitgroove mentioned. But I have to imagine that there's some collaboration between Square Enix, Bitgroove, and Success to create Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. Dark Road was periodically updated with chapters until August of 2022 when the last episode of the game was released. This coincided with Kingdom Hearts Union Cross coming offline and Dark Road being made available to be played separately in the offline version of the Union Cross app, meaning that it didn't rely on servers anymore to connect people playing together. The server was just for the single player experience, or just to like download the app. As of August 2024, the game has been delisted and is unavailable to play or experience in any capacity on any smartphone operating device or operating system. So the app is just completely gone. And there are some theories as to why that is. I don't think Square Enix just took it off of the store to be selfish, but I have to, the one I subscribe to the most is, as I was scrolling some Reddit threads, is that someone mentioned that maybe Union Cross's or Square Enix's deal with the respective app stores was up and they didn't want to pay to renew for something as small as Dark Road, because comparatively, Dark Road is probably the smallest Kingdom Hearts game in terms of what it accomplishes, what it tells us, and compared to Union Cross, which was a behemoth of an online social mobile experience, they probably didn't want to pay whatever Apple or Google was asking to have those games remain listed on the store. So they were removed. They're unavailable now. The only way you can experience Dark Road is through the preservation that the community has done on YouTube or any other video sharing service where people have captured and chronicled the gameplay and the story of Dark Road. I'm hoping that No More recognizes that there's important elements to this story, and I hope that he plans to give it to us in some way. Even if he doesn't give us the gameplay experience, I hope he gives us the story of Dark Road in some capacity, whether that's a short little movie like they did Key Back Cover, or whether that's just in making all the cutscenes available somewhere in some kind of collection that comes out, or maybe as part of Kingdom Hearts 4 when it comes out. That would be kind of cool. I don't know. But my hope is that No More recognizes that they decided to not renew it. That was probably a decision made at the high corporate level of Square Enix in order to like save money, because Square Enix is kind of in a little bit of turmoil right now in regards to the success of some of their projects. We'll have to see if Dark Road resurfaces. Seeing that there's not really any data available as to like review scores for this game or how many units this game sold or how many downloads they were, I looked everywhere. I wasn't quite sure how. So, and you can't really gauge that because it was part of the Union Cross app. So anybody that had the Union Cross app downloaded also would have access to Dark Road when that update went live. So it's kind of difficult to gauge how many people played it and if anybody reviewed it at all, because there were very few review scores for Union Cross specifically. So because of that, I'll just dive right into some of my thoughts on Dark Road, and then we'll talk about the dev history, the gameplay, before diving into story. I have some thoughts on how I feel about Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. Now that I've at least experienced the story in its fullness for the first time, I watched the entire story on YouTube. I did play it briefly back when I was a pretty dedicated Union Cross player, but I think I kind of fell off of it. Or maybe I just like played the first episode and then bounced off it, never returned because I kind of burned out on the Union Cross mobile game. But I know I was pretty hostile towards Union Cross, but what I can say positively about it is that Union Cross's story is very compelling with its narrative, its stakes, its consequences for the greater story and world, and for some of the mysteries it gives us around the earliest times that we've been revealed in the Kingdom Hearts timeline. Most importantly, the enigma that is the Master of Masters, who appears to have been set up to take kind of the main antagonist role in the upcoming Kingdom Hearts games, because it's called the Lost Masters arc or the Lost Masters story arc. Whether or not he's like a villain or whether or not he's just kind of like a antagonistic force, it's very clear that he has his own goals beyond what any of the characters in the series understand right now. And just based on like his theme music and the way he acts and kind of the way he manipulates events, it feels very sinister. So I know I was hostile towards Union Cross in the way it presents itself for being a mobile gacha game, but I will say that the story is very compelling. It's very confusing. It was a challenge to kind of flesh out and explain the entire story as I did back in both parts of Union Cross, but it was very rewarding to do so, as much of the things in the Kingdom Hearts series are, when you accept that challenge to learn what the games are trying to tell you. I can say the same towards Dark Road. It's a fascinating, in-depth, and intimate look at the major antagonist of the series so far, and it gives us a lot of context into why Xehanort makes the decisions he does and goes down the path or the dark road that he goes down. Because remember, the story in Dark Road is going to tell us the story of Xehanort's youth when he was training to be a Keyblade wielder. But remember, a younger version of Xehanort has already time traveled from the past to the future to be part of the real organization, be part of the events of Kingdom Hearts 3. And when he returns to his time to grow up and live out his life, he has no memory of the things that he does when he goes to the future, but those experiences are etched on his heart and kind of lay out a dark road, a dark path for him to follow. And this story kind of tells us what happens during Xehanort's youth to lead him on this path to where he ends up, this major antagonistic force in the Kingdom Hearts series. I don't much like the gameplay or the way it's presented again, because I think this is a very compelling narrative, and it's frustrating to me again that this was relegated to a mobile game. Now, I understand that telling the story via mobile game is probably less resource intensive rather than doing like a traditional spin-off Kingdom Hearts game or like a movie or something. But it's still frustrating to me because the revelations in this story and making Xehanort the main character after he was the bad guy for so long is a really cool and really interesting idea. Well, I think that the main games do a pretty good job of fleshing out his motivations. The expanded look at his youth in this game adds so much depth to his character, and some of the revelations, I would argue, make his story a little more tragic. Make no mistake about it. The things that Xehanort has done over the course of the Kingdom Hearts series are awful, and they fly in the face of all the things the characters in the series stand for, the lessons, the themes, everything in Kingdom Hearts that it stands for and that wears on its sleeve, that it tries to be sincere about. Xehanort is the antithesis to all of those things. But it does allow you to sympathize with him a little bit. And I think that sympathizing with the characters in Kingdom Hearts allows you to connect with them better and enhance the story. I've grown to have a great love and respect for Xehanort as a character, as an antagonist. I think he's one of the best antagonists in video game history. He's certainly one of the best fleshed out antagonists in video game history. This also continues our expanded look at some of the past events of Kingdom Hearts, the time before Birth by Sleep. We get an interesting look at the earlier Keyblade Order. This story, like I said, takes place during Xehanort's and Ericus's youth, during the time they are training to become Keyblade wielders under their master. They take classes in order to accomplish this goal, and they have classmates who they consider friends. The story does take place in Scala ad Caelum, so we get to see it during its heyday as well. If you remember in Kingdom Hearts 3, when you went to Scala ad Caelum, Xehanort called it a seat of power for all Keyblade wielders and the nexus from which all worlds spring. So we get to see a little bit of this, what Scala was like when it was more active, because when we were there in Kingdom Hearts 3, whether it was like a dream version or just a representation of what Scala was in Xehanort's memories, there's nobody else there. Obviously, this creates a little bit of an interesting atmosphere for the game. We know in the future and in the rest of the games, despite Ericus and Xehanort being present, the rest of these figures are not present. So, as I was playing it, there was kind of this eerie sense of foreboding when going through this game because of what we know about Xehanort's future, and wondering what is going to happen to the rest of these characters, because they're obviously not present in the mainline games. And that's the problem with doing a story like this so late in the series, if you've already concluded the story of Xehanort, is that any new characters that you add, it's kind of like the Rogue One problem, right? You want to do this story in between Star Wars Episode 3 and Star Wars Episode 4, but you have to do something with all these characters that you introduce in Rogue One because they're not present in the rest of the Star Wars stories. So you either have to like bench them or have a tragic ending for them. Same thing with Halo Reach, right? When Halo Reach came out, we'd been told the previous like 3 or 4 Halo games what happened to Reach. That was kind of like a whole thing, is that Reach was like one of humanity's most treasured planets, and the Covenant fleet showed up and basically fucking nuked it and made it unlivable. And all the Spartan characters in Halo Reach, spoiler alert, die because there's no place for them in the rest of the series because they haven't been present for the entire series. Only Master Chief is present as like the last Spartan. So it kind of has a bit of that atmosphere going for it. Even though in Kingdom Hearts, death tends to not be very permanent, all of these characters that we get introduced to, except for like Xehanort and Ericus, are not present throughout the rest of the Kingdom Hearts story, throughout the rest of the Kingdom Hearts timeline. Now, I'm not saying that some of their fates may be a little bit ambiguous. Some of their, death is never permanent if some of these characters do die. And I'm not saying they can't show up in the future because, again, we literally just played a game where all of the prior organization members that we defeated in Kingdom Hearts 2 returned. And obviously, Luxu has just been changing, going through bodies left and right until he arrived at Xigbar and was present for, all the stuff that we just played in the Kingdom Hearts series. Speaking of Luxu, I went into this with a little bit more of a cautious eye, correct? Because the things I revealed to you about Luxu after Kingdom Hearts 3, after the big reveal that Xigbar was Luxu, I told you that Luxu has been present observing all of these events, as was his role given to him by the Master of Masters. So I went into this with a skeptical eye, wondering if, it felt to me like Luxu was lurking around any corner, like he was somehow present in these events, even though I did not know what form he took. He could have been anyone or any person, but I felt like Luxu was close at hand because that's what he's always done. He bequeathed the Master's Gazing Eye Keyblade to his apprentice, and that Keyblade has been passed down. And you see it on the wall of the classroom where Xehanort and Ericus have their classes. So it leads me to believe that Luxu is somewhere close by, keeping an eye on that Keyblade as what he was instructed to by the Master. So that creates a little bit of an interesting angle you can approach this game, where it's like, okay, we know this about Luxu now. This game takes place in the timeline before we get that reveal. So what is he doing now? Where is he at? And that's something that I kept an eye out for throughout the majority of this game, and that may or may not come into play a little bit later. We'll have to see. Diving into some of the development history here, I don't have a fancy written scripted part of this episode to tell you about the development history, as I've kind of been, the previous parts of Guiding Keys, I've woven this story of Nomura's time making this game and his team and the ups and downs they had and why the certain games were made. I didn't really have that with this game because it was kind of just like tossed in with Union Cross. It was just kind of like a side project. So I just did a little bit of research and wrote down some interesting dates as to when things were announced, when it was released, the impact of the pandemic, and just the game going offline. So I just have a little bit of that information here just so you can kind of appreciate the timeline as to when this game came out and when it concluded. So Kingdom Hearts Dark Road was first hinted at by Nomura on January 22nd, 2020 in a Q&A session he did to celebrate the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind DLC. And this was around the time that the Remind DLC was coming out. The Union Cross Twitter account later that day, the same day, posted a sketch image of young Xehanort and young Ericus with other characters around them blurred out, and this would end up being one of the key pieces of key art for Dark Road. Then on the following day, on January 23rd, the game was announced with the working title Project Xehanort. And they ran a Guess the Name Twitter campaign, which is kind of clever because Kingdom Hearts fans are always making up these ridiculous names for these Kingdom Hearts games that come out because the naming conventions for them are kind of ridiculous. So they had this whole campaign where people would like guess the name under the working title Project Xehanort. And then a week later, the title would be revealed on January 31st, 2020, revealed to be Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. The game was slated to come out sooner, although I'm not sure which specific date was the original intended release date. Obviously, because of the pandemic, development on Dark Road was significantly delayed because everybody stayed at their homes, everybody was working from home. Video game development continued, but it was mostly done on a work from home basis, and it was kind of delayed everything, even a small mobile game like this. The delay was announced on May 18th, 2020. The game would later release on June 22nd, 2020 during the Union Cross rebrand. So just because of the pandemic, they just needed a little bit of extra time to get this and the rebrand across the finish line. That's fine. That's understandable. Not a big deal. In the middle of Dark Road's episodic release schedule, the servers for the Union Cross app were shut down on May 30th, 2021. This left the game incomplete. I don't know if they were like in the middle, like on episode 4 or 5. But Square Enix assured fans that an offline version of the app would be made available along with the completed story so the fans could experience the rest of the game. So they were going to update the game so that it could have an offline component. You wouldn't be able to play Union Cross anymore. You could still watch the cutscenes. You would be able to play and finish Dark Road. And they continued to release episodes until the final chapter was released in August of 2022. And that's where the game stood. That game was available in its entirety to play offline. You could go in the Union Cross app and either watch the Union Cross cutscenes, or you could play the Dark Road experience. And of course, that was available until August of 2024, when the game was officially delisted from all app stores. And I gave you my reasons as to why I thought that was. The most likely explanation is that they did not want to renew their agreement with the online app stores, I would assume, but who knows. I'll roll gameplay into this section too. I won't make it a separate section. And I only have my very brief time I spent with the game and watching gameplay footage on YouTube to go off of. So if I make some mistakes in my description of the gameplay, I apologize. I was not able to experience this as was the intended way, and I'm very frustrated about it. But that being said, I'll try and explain to you what the gameplay here looks like. And standard gameplay differs drastically from Union Cross, although I would say it's similar in spirit because there are way less gotcha elements present in Dark Road. It has much more standard RPG, action RPG elements. So whenever you embark to a world to advance the story, it's usually as part of a party. So at the beginning of the game, for example, when you first go to Agrabah, that's the first world, you can pick the third Keyblade wielder that goes with Xehanort and Ericus. Xehanort, as the main character, will be attacking in the battles. He has a deck of cards that he uses to attack, for example, while the party members that go with him all have different, quote, styles that affect combat. For example, when Ericus goes with you, his style is attack boost. One of the other Keyblade wielders named Erd has a style that is, quote, blizzard. Another one named Vor has a style that is, quote, magic boost, and these all augment combat in a certain way. And the way you perform combat is you flick/tap cards to attack, and cards show up randomly in 3 colors depending on the deck you've built: red, green, and blue. You tap 3 cards at a time, and based on what you play, you deal damage. If you play 3 of the same color card, you'll do maximum damage, but you have to be quick in making your decisions because the battles happen in like this active time scenario, and the enemy has an attack gauge that is constantly filling up as well and when it does, the enemy will attack. Your companions will also take actions in combat based on their style. And that's obviously will support you, like attack boost or blizzard, attacking with magic like blizzard, or boosting your magic, things like that. There's also a yellow gauge that fills up behind where your hand of cards is shown. And when it does, you can play cards at like twice the speed to deal massive damage very quickly. Upon completing battles, you gain BP, battle points, which you can use to increase Xehanort's level, increasing his stats. Like I said, there are some gotcha elements with the gems from Union Cross and getting cards to add to Xehanort's deck and augment his attack. You can like complete missions or side quests and stuff like that to get more points, to get more currency, to buy more cards, to add to Xehanort's deck, make it more powerful. You can also complete missions to get currency, items to help in battle, equipables, and more. In order to advance the story, you have a main mission that you have to fulfill. So, for example, the first time you are in Agrabah, your first mission quest is to like defeat 30 Heartless. And after completing enough missions, you'll eventually get to the next story beat. That's how you advance the story. It may not be very clear. I'm trying to explain the gameplay based off of secondhand knowledge. There's a card element to it, which kind of like brings in some of the card stuff from Chain of Memories, which I think is interesting. But then the way you can get like cards of different characters and stuff also kind of ties into the Union Cross stuff with the gotcha aspect. I'm not sure if you like pull those cards at random or if you can like buy like specific ones in the shop based on like what world you're in. That wasn't super clear, but you do amass cards throughout your adventure and it makes Xehanort more powerful. You do use your battle points to make Xehanort more powerful. You can like replay missions, you can replay quests to guess grind and get more battle points and level up Xehanort even more. So it's more of like a traditional RPG in that sense, but there's still some of those like gotcha infused elements into the game. Without further ado, let's dive into the story. And like I said, we'll be covering episodes 1 through 4. That in itself was kind of a lie because we do have a little bit of a prologue here first before we get to the episodes. And we'll go through the prologue first. And I guess I'll just start telling you the story of Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. Before the game proper starts, we see flashbacks of all the events that happened to our player character in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, almost like a series of dreams before we're transported in a flash to the Destiny Islands, where a young white-haired boy is lying on the sands of the beach before he jolts awake. We know this young adolescent as none other than Xehanort. His inner monologue suggests that the events he sees are his dreams, and he has this recurring dream of these events, friends, moments, and memories over and over and over. He laments his situation being stuck on one of a number of islands, surrounded by an endless ocean, yearning for the day he could leave and seek the outside world and maybe find out the truth to the dreams that he has been having. And remember, I kind of explained this to you at the end of Union Cross when, remember, our character is dying, essentially, at the end of Union Cross, and he has two choices. He can become a dream eater when he goes to sleep, or he can reincarnate into another life. And he chooses to reincarnate into another life. And the fake out there is that Nomura tries to make us believe that our player character reincarnated into Xehanort, which is kind of what this is going for too, but that's not exactly what happens. The fact that Xehanort is having these dreams of our player character's adventures and all of the friends that he made around him will be explained, but I'll just tell you up front right now, our player character is not Xehanort. And as much as I really love that twist, that is not what's going on here. So, as Xehanort is having this yearning, he's approached by a familiar figure, the man in the brown robe, who we know is the future Ansem Seeker of Darkness. He has traveled back in time to meet the young Xehanort and set him on his destined path. He urges Xehanort to seek the outside world as he calls Xehanort his waypoint, and also tells Xehanort that he is his waypoint as well. Arcs, pods, Union Cross, yes, all that time travel stuff. If you don't remember it, pause the episode now, go back and listen to it. It's fantastic. He opens a dark portal telling Xehanort it's easier than he thinks to take his first steps. And as Xehanort does, we flash forward in time to a different scene. So we know that this happens because we know that this brown-robed Ansem, being the heart, being able to travel back in time, travels this far back to set his younger self on the appropriate path. We know that Ansem Seeker of Darkness shares knowledge of time travel with younger Xehanort, but we assume that he just immediately sends him into the future, which doesn't appear to be the case here. It appears that Ansem is responsible for first sending Xehanort out into the world off of the Destiny Islands, which is interesting because if Ansem Seeker of Darkness doesn't travel back to do that, then Xehanort doesn't grow up to become the person he does, splitting himself and then causing Ansem Seeker of Darkness to come back and set him on his destined path. It's kind of like a time paradox. Like, both things have to happen for both things to happen. It's interesting to think about it that way. But we have the scene transition. We flash forward in time to a different scene. We see the familiar ringed cities of Scala ad Kylum, and we find Xehanort sitting on a bench where he is approached by his best friend, Ericus. The two are Keyblade wielders in training, and Ericus has come to get his friend for class that starts in a few minutes. But before they leave, Ericus questions Xehanort about the outside world, revealing a bit to us that Xehanort obviously found his way here after entering the dark portal that was opened for him by Ansem. But Ansem plays coy with this information, holding it close to his chest. In their conversation, Ericus makes some interesting points, like stating that the other various towns and cities beyond Scala ad Kylum proper that we see on the horizon are all empty, which is a fascinating bit of lore that may come up later. So only this ringed city portion where they're at is the only one that is inhabited. The two boys head to class, but not before teasing one another about their multiple chess matchups. Remember, Alban Otter. It's very clear that Ericus craves information on the outside world, as he has not yet been allowed to go into the outside world, meaning that he must have been born here. Both Ericus and Xehanort make their way to the classroom, which is in a large room with large windows a white and black checkerboard floor, a beautifully carved ornate staircase, a large central table, and a large desk in front of the room that is in front of a chalkboard. The two friends share some banter with their 5 classmates, whose names we will learn in a moment, until their teacher, known as Master Odin, enters the room and bids them to sit. Odin is an older gentleman. He has a long white beard. He wears a gray robe over a tan tunic, and on his brow sits a large brimmed wizard's hat, obscuring the upper part of his face and his eyes. Well, one of his eyes is visible beneath the wide brim, but the other is obscured from view. Perhaps he's missing it. We know the gazing eye keyblade has a spare eyeball in it, so we're not sure about Master Odin here. As he begins to address them, we get more inner monologuing from Xehanort, talking about how his journey began with a single step. We flash back to him standing in front of the portal on Destiny Islands as he gathers himself up and steps into it, not looking back. And it is here that we get the title shot of the game, Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. It is here we go into episode 1, titled Unexpected Departure. After we get the title shot, we transition back to the classroom, and before Odin speaks further, we get another title shot of the name of this episode. Master Odin begins to explain why he has called his students there. This isn't their everyday, regular, scheduled class. He informs them that their fellow 7 upperclassmen have gone missing while undergoing training for their Mark of Mastery exam. He then explains a bit about the state of the world that we're already familiar with, that they all used to be one, the Keyblade War happened, and now they're all separate. But in their training, students who are preparing to undertake the Mark of Mastery exam get to travel to these outside worlds to broaden their horizons. Xehanort inquires how to get to these worlds, and Odin alludes to several ways, but Ericus, in an outburst, correctly guesses that these are not taught to lower classmen such as themselves. Odin is saying that he's making the exception. However, he is going to teach this group of students how to travel to the outside worlds, for he tasks them with using this knowledge to go out into the worlds and locate the missing wielders, the missing upperclassmen, their fellow students. Reactions are varied. Ericus and another male classmate are excited. Xehanort and a fellow female classmate urge restraint, reminding the two that this is serious. People are missing. What's more, a female student notices that one of their classmates is missing, an individual that she refers to as Balder, leaving them as a class of 6 instead of a class of 7. Odin tells them this is intentional, that he has given Balder a different assignment. You see, Balder's sister is one of the missing upperclassmen, and Odin hasn't told Balder yet, wishing to avoid any unnecessary concern or rash courses of action. The students leave the classroom and assemble in the courtyard, and as they begin to discuss a course of action, the students defer to Xehanort, seeing that he's the only one that has actually been in the outside worlds. It appears that Xehanort has a bit of a leadership role amongst his fellow students here, and here Xehanort gives us a look at the state of the worlds post-Keyblade War. He comments on how after the worlds were separated after the Keyblade War, they've all spent time reestablishing themselves and reforming. Some are further along in this process than others, and that in each world, time flows differently. Some worlds have fully restored themselves and time has begun to flow at the regular rate, while in others, they are still in a state of reformation, therefore time is different there. The worlds are moving forward at different speeds from different starting lines, and this helps to explain some of the wonky time passage that seems to occur in the Disney worlds between games. Wherever they end up going, Xehanort urges caution and tells them they can't interfere with the world's natural development, which is something we've known for a long time in the Kingdom Hearts series. Keyblade wielders are not supposed to interfere with the established orders of the world unless they are doing things related to fighting the Heartless, fighting darkness, fighting nobodies. They are not supposed to just go around and like conquer worlds and overthrow people and just interfere in world politics. The point of all this is to say that in the chaos of different worlds forming at different speeds/times, this could have played a factor into the older students' disappearances. So, to increase their chances of survival and success, the 6 students decide to split into 2 groups of 3 and search separate worlds. It is here that we learn the names of our fellow students as we are taken into a pick your party screen. In addition to Xehanort and Ericus, we have Hermod, a boy with ash gray hair and a gold-trimmed black robe that kind of gradients to like a dirty yellow at the bottom. We have Braggy, a boy with light brown hair and a shirt that sports some feathery trimming along the hood. We have Erd, a girl with white hair pulled back into a ponytail, wearing a gray dress with a black robe draped over. And Vor, a girl with sandy blonde shoulder-length hair who wears a flowing purple robe. You can pick any person to accompany Xehanort and Ericus, and I think the dialogue will end up being the same for that third person because it would be stupid to write 4 different versions of dialogue depending on what character you pick for a mobile game. To travel safely, the wielders don their Keyblade armor similar to how the characters did in Birth by Sleep, and their Keyblades can transform into the vehicles, again, we saw this in Birth by Sleep, to travel to the different worlds. It's super cool to see all the apprentices in their armor here. Ericus looks like a smaller version of his master's armor from Birth by Sleep, and Xehanort's armor actually looks like the armored boss fight against Xemnas in Kingdom Hearts 2. So that's a nice little connection. If you remember in Kingdom Hearts 3, he had like this demonic goat head looking armor, but I really like this look for his armor as it ties back into Kingdom Hearts 2 because I think that's like the first time we actually see it. So that's a nice little tie-in to Xemnas there. So the group we're following ends up in Agora, and that consists of Ericus, Xehanort, and the third person that you choose. And pretty much immediately when they arrive, they are confronted with mysterious dark beings that they correctly identify as Heartless. The trio gains a bit of confidence after defeating the Heartless threat, and as they begin to explore Agrabah, it's clear that this world is still in a state of reforming. Some of the landscape is still filled with like gaping holes, and there are no people to be found anywhere. So the 3 wielders are wandering the empty streets of Agrabah. They're trying to put together what happened. They deduce that people are restored last when a world is restored. And talking about the 2 types of Heartless, they have the Emblem Heartless and the Pureblood Heartless. Remember, Emblem Heartless were artificially created in the far future by Ansem, so how could they be here? Possibly a clue. And if I'm remembering correctly, this doesn't really get established or elaborated on. I don't really remember it, so don't quote me on that. Just accept that the Heartless are there. It's fine. Don't worry about it. They continue to explore. They encounter some stronger Heartless, and then they theorize that this might be the reason for the upperclassmen's disappearance. Together, the 3 of them could handle the Heartless, but alone, they theorize that even an upper-class Keyblade wielder with more training might have trouble if they were by themselves. They decide to call it a day. Ericus, Xehanort, and the third wielder decide to return to Scala ad Caelum, and the 6 classmates reunite and exchange clues. Both groups had encountered the Heartless, and they all conclude that, yes, even with formal training, upperclassmen might have trouble if they encountered the Heartless alone. They agree to not report anything to Master Odin yet, and they meet up the next day to search for more clues. But before that, we get a flash forward to a scene in the future with the text on the screen reading 4 years later, indicating that is how much time has passed. It's a dark and rainy day, and a now teenage Xehanort is kneeling before a gravestone, leaving flowers on the ground in front of it. The camera pans to reveal not 1, not 2, but 4 gravestones with flowers. Ericus approaches him, and based on their conversation, it appears that Xehanort is leaving. Ericus tells Xehanort that he doesn't have to leave and what happened wasn't his fault. And I think we can make a pretty bold leap in logic here that the other 4 classmates, Hermod, Bragi, Erd, and Vor, have met a tragic end. But Xehanort is determined to see what else is out there before the Mark of Mastery exam. Ericus begrudgingly lets his friend go, but tells him he better return because they have a chess score to settle. And that is the end of episode 1. We now move on to episode 2, titled The Presence of Darkness. We start off with a bit of a recap monologue from Xehanort's point of view, talking about him leaving the island, how his days are spent playing out the same despite being in a different location. But he mentions also how it all feels familiar in his heart because he time traveled and his destined path is etched on his heart. He then talks a little bit about maybe it's not what he's doing, but the people he's around and how those connections can influence the growth of the heart as can light or darkness. We jump into the main episode here. Xehanort, Ericus, and a third wielder are in Wonderland when we get the title shot for episode 2. Like I said, titled The Presence of Darkness. Based on conversation, they appear to be waiting for their other 3 classmates. And since they are in Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat appears and cryptically tells them that their friends have been captured, and at this moment, a bunch of playing card guards surround them. But before they arrest Ericus and Xehanort's group, the red playing card calls the rest of them to the Queen's court for the trial is about to begin for the other intruders that they caught. Xehanort and Ericus draw the logical conclusion that this must be their friends, and they give chase. Ericus, Xehanort, and the third wielder arrive in the Queen's court to see their friends receiving an unfair trial at the hands of the Queen of Hearts. Shocking and surprising. Ericus summons his Keyblade, determined to take action and save their friends, but Xehanort stops him, telling him that they have to protect the world's order. They decide to try and reason with the Queen, rushing in to interrupt her trial as she proclaims the other trio guilty. Xehanort and Ericus try to argue with her, but she is blinded by power, ruling by fear, and as her playing card guards stack up to attack them, there's an ominous dark aura that manifests behind the Queen as she rages. Xehanort spots it, but before he can act on it, the guards are all blasted to the side as the Queen's darkness has called a fearsome-looking Heartless wielding a gigantic scythe. The classmates all work together to overcome the fearsome Heartless, and they reconvene in the forest after escaping the Queen's court. They talk about their experience with the Heartless, and Hermod mentions that he too saw the darkness manifest around the Queen, a power even more fearsome than the Heartless. That's what causes the Queen to rule through fear. But they remember the rule to not interfere with a world's order, and Hermod questions if it's their place to interfere if ruling via darkness is the way of the world here. They then start to wonder if maybe it's not just the Heartless's responsibility for the upperclassmen's disappearance. Maybe it was a person touched by darkness. Ericus and Xehanort then experience a flashback, a memory of the Keyblade wielder Brain, who tells his fellow Union leaders that darkness can hide anywhere, even inside someone. And both Xehanort and Ericus say the same thing in unison in the present time. Before they leave, Ericus asks his friend Xehanort if he is okay. And here we start to see some of the gears turning in Xehanort's mind and some of his foundations of his thoughts towards the darkness forming. He kind of monologues out loud about the nature of the Queen's power. She clearly rules by fear due to the darkness in her heart, but she is blinded to this and thinks her subjects love and respect her. He wonders if it's possible for darkness to burrow so deep into someone's heart that they don't even know it's there. Will they ever have to be put in a position to make that call, to raise their Keyblades against someone who doesn't know that darkness resides within their hearts? The classmates agree to split up again. Ericus, Xehanort, and a third classmate agree to stay in Wonderland to search for more clues, while the rest are going to move on to a different world. We get another flash forward. 4 years, about the same time frame that we did in the first episode. And it's back in Wonderland. A teenage Xehanort has allowed himself to be captured by the card guards and be brought before the Queen of Hearts. As he is put on trial, the Queen's rage causes the darkness to manifest around her once more. Xehanort grins, clearly hoping this would happen as he slowly approaches the stand. And this is where episode 2 draws to a close. Here begins episode 3, titled The Purpose of the Journey. We begin episode 3 with another Xehanort monologue. He is walking along the dark corridor after going through the portal on Destiny Islands. He talks about how after a time he begins to feel the presence of the darkness as whispers in his head, but not just his own darkness, but the darkness of others directed towards him, people he had not met yet. It was terrible, but in a way, Xehanort said that he appreciated it. It gave him comfort to know that he could still feel, even if the feelings were horrible. We arrive back in Wonderland to see Xehanort vanquish a Heartless as we get the title shot for episode 3, Ericus, Xehanort, and in this instance, Vor, the female Keyblade wielder, continue their search, and Vor pushes them to reveal their plan because they obviously have one since Ericus and Xehanort decided to stay behind. Before they can tell her the plan, they annoyingly get interrupted by twin dwarfs, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, who tell them a story about curiosity. They then have a strange encounter with the Mad Hatter and the March Hare for tea time, an encounter that when they finish leaves them perplexed. After this, they kind of explain to Vor their rationale for staying behind. The Queen didn't mention any other intruders that were found in this world, so Xehanort and Ericus were able to rule out their older classmates being there, but they are convinced that the darkness they saw in the Queen, the one that she was harboring, might provide a clue overall as to what happened to the wielders, considering 7 of them went missing all at the same time, which is highly unusual. They want to know if the Queen is a source of this darkness or a vessel. The 3 friends find their way back to the Queen's court and start to converse with her, convincing her to hear them out. Ericus and Xehanort take point, talking to her to better understand the source of her control over the world and what causes her darkness to manifest. They end up infuriating her, which causes the darkness to emanate from her once again, and as Ericus and Xehanort offer up several explanations as to what feelings her darkness is rooted in, if it's greed or perhaps wrath, they just serve to infuriate her even more. As they try to work this out, we get a flashback to a classroom lesson with Master Odin, who begins to explain the nature of darkness to them. He said in ancient times, darkness was like a disease. It would take control of people's hearts and use that to spread like a plague as far and wide as possible. And we know this because darkness was a tangible thing. It was the 13 darknesses that could take over people's bodies and spread darkness. But as time went on, something changed. Darkness began to appear in people's hearts naturally, and from this innate darkness, the Heartless were born. Odin says that over time, darkness and hearts became naturally entangled with one another. A student asks the question, how is darkness born in the heart? And Odin answers, it comes from negative emotions, greed, ire, envy. Over the course of time, the darkness had effectively reshaped what human beings could become. Strong people could resist this darkness manifested by negative emotions, but many people succumb to it. So here's kind of an important distinction made between darkness as an entity in the Kingdom Hearts universe. We have the 13 true darknesses who are the true enemies of the Master of Masters from a time when darkness was actual beings. And they used to invade people's hearts, and that's how they would spread it across the world. But over time, darkness became entangled as part of a heart's natural essence, and it could occur in a heart naturally if there was enough presence of negative, what were considered negative emotions, greed, ire, envy, jealousy, frustration, loneliness. So we kind of get a little more interesting lore on the darkness itself, not this just nameless, faceless foreboding force that permeates the Kingdom Hearts universe is something that grows from the negative emotions in a person's heart. And this makes sense, but this does draw a distinct line between what we would consider the true darkness or the prime darknesses and darkness that occurs naturally in a person's heart. Because Odin does go out of his way to say that strong people could resist darkness manifested by negative emotions, but many people would succumb to it. We flash back to the Queen's court. The darkness around her flares, and Xehanort is stunned. He swears he can see it smiling. The Queen's anger boils over, demanding the three wielders' execution, and the darkness explodes from within her, forming into a different variant of the scythe-wielding Heartless that we fought in the last episode. With their combined power, the three friends manage to defeat it. Ericus and Xehanort both feel like they are on the right path, drawing the conclusion that following the darkness may provide them more clues. They decide to return to Scala to reunite with their friends and share their findings. And share their findings they do. The group agrees that following the darkness is probably the best lead that they have, but Xehanort can't help wonder if maybe they are begetting the darkness. He says that one light can cast many shadows, and as guardians of light, maybe they are manifesting it as they venture out into the worlds. Maybe the upperclassmen attracted it as well. They then tried to puzzle out the nature of the Queen's darkness, whether it came from internal or external sources. Bragi recounts one of Odin's lessons, saying that when the negative emotions in one's heart are so overwhelming, it manifests as darkness. Xehanort then also makes an interesting observation. Maybe the narrative of light is good, darkness is bad doesn't hold up in Wonderland, for example. The Queen and her darkness maintain the order of that world, and maybe that's just how it is there. This angers Ericus pretty severely, who up until this point, we've seen that a young Ericus has kind of had the kind of sunny, positive, optimistic, and sometimes aloof disposition, kind of like how Sora's had. But Ericus is adamant here. He said that there is no gray area. They are light's guardians, and darkness is bad no matter what the situation. The friends manage to calm Ericus down, and they agree to continue to follow this lead of darkness, as it's the best chance they have of finding their classmates. And it's interesting that we see Ericus's hatred of darkness so strong here, because he maintains this even when we see an older version of him in Birth by Sleep, where he's very adamant. He's like, the light's the only way, darkness must be destroyed. As they're conversing, we have a flashback scene to a week ago where we see a white-haired youth with gray eyes staring out over the vast waters of Scala ad Caelum. This is Balder, the younger brother of one of the missing wielders in the class above them. Ericus approaches Balder, asking him if he's okay, which he says he isn't. Balder explains that his sister left on her Mark of Mastery exam trip with her other classmates, and the way she explained it to Balder is that the ones who return will be made Keyblade Masters. This sounds ominous to Ericus, like they aren't expecting everyone to return, and Balder continues saying that this doesn't line up with the Mark of Mastery exam that they were told about. He worries about the darkness taking his sister, and Ericus flinches at the mention of darkness. Balder apologizes as he monologues some background information about Ericus's family, saying that Ericus's grandfather battled the darkness and was lost to it. Ericus tells him it's okay and reassures him that his sister will be fine as this episode comes to a close. Remember, Ericus eventually ends up with the Master Defender Keyblade, the Keyblade that was originally bequeathed by Brain to Ephemer and handed down from there. But then Brain also receives the Gazing Eye Keyblade at the end of Union Cross, maybe potentially. So it's a little bit there. I believe the intention there is saying that Ericus is a descendant of Brain's family line, if I remember correctly, us kind of like working that out. I'm not quite sure. Maybe I said it was ephemer in the Union Cross episode, but I don't think it's ephemer. I think when this is all said and done, I think there's a revelation that it's actually Xehanort, who is a descendant of ephemer, and that would mean Ericus is a descendant of Brain's family lineage. But we'll work all that out once we get to the epilogue of the game. This brings episode 3 to a close. We've arrived at episode 4, titled Cruel Clues. Episode 4 opens on a familiar scene. We see a young Xehanort and a young Ericus playing the chess-like game Alba and Otter, and this is basically a recreation of the opening scene from Kingdom Hearts 3, where Xehanort tells Ericus about the Keyblade War, the Lost Masters, although this rendition of the scene, we get text that tells us this is 1 year earlier than the current time. So 1 year before all this stuff with the upperclassmen are happening. We transition to the current time where we get the title shot for episode 4, Cruel Clues, as we see Vor, one of Xehanort's classmates, walking amongst a dilapidated castle as she openly monologues to us that she is lost. Upon further explanation, she stumbles into the Evil Queen's chambers from Snow White. We know we're in the Dwarf Woodlands. Stumbles into the chambers in time to see the Evil Queen ask the magic mirror on the wall a question. Her answer in hand, the queen leaves, and with the room empty, Vor decides to approach the mirror to ask a question, although the scene fades and we don't see the result of this interaction quite yet. A short while later, Vor manages to reunite with Xehanort and Ericus, who are in this world also, but she chooses to withhold information on the castle and the mirror from them for now. It isn't long before they run across the titular dwarves from the Snow White movie, and they decide to investigate. Their other friends appear to be trapped behind a cave-in, and Vor pretty comically moves the boulders with her bare hands, freeing the other dwarves. They thank the three wielders for their help when suddenly Heartless appear, drilling in from the ceiling and destabilizing the mine. Xehanort and company waste no time mopping up the Heartless, and Xehanort and Ericus are kind of perturbed that they are attempting to track down the darkness, but all they've managed to find are these random Heartless. This is where Vor reveals her information about the castle and the magic mirror, and she agrees to lead them there. They approach the mirror, and aside from Ericus jokingly asking the mirror how to beat Xehanort at chess, they begin to ask it about the 7 upperclassmen. The mirror reveals something, that they are all separate, that they walk separate paths. Ericus begins to ask about one person in particular, named Vidar, the first name that we know of their elder classmates. But before the mirror answers, the evil queen appears, chastising them for breaking into her castle. She then throws a potion at the mirror and bids it to consume the intruders, which kicks off a boss fight. We obviously defeat the spirit of the mirror, and they begin to ask the mirror once again about the location of Vidar, because this is unnecessary, as Vidar's voice speaks from behind them, and the camera pans to reveal none other than Vidar himself. He asks the trio if they were sent by Master Odin, and then pretty quickly zeroes in on Xehanort, calling him Visitant, and saying that he understands why Master Odin took an interest in him. Interesting thing here, I just looked it up in the middle. Visitant is defined by the Oxford Dictionary. As a noun, it's a supernatural being or agency, an apparition, or in terms of an adjective, you can use it. It's paying a visit. The housekeeper was abrupt with the poor visitant niece, which is the example that it gives. So I'm not really sure why he refers to Xehanort in this manner here. Vidar then singles out Vor, saying that the look in her eyes is easy to read. She wonders if she truly belongs with these so-called friends of hers. Vidar then makes her an offer to come with him, to which Xehanort surprisingly asks if Vidar is coming back with them, which he declines, stating that he still has work to do. Ericus steps between Vidar and Vor, insisting Vor return with them, but in actuality, she decides to go with Vidar. We flash back to the first scene of Vor with the mirror, and the question that she asks the mirror is if she will ever be a true Keyblade master. It essentially gives her an answer that goes like this. Her heart lies with her friends, but in this way she will stagnate and cease to grow, failing to achieve her goal. Vor tells Ericus that eventually they will go their separate ways, and the longer she stays in the status quo, the harder it will be for her to leave. She decides to forsake her bonds and go with Vidar to further her training as a Keyblade master. Ericus is dismayed at this development, but Xehanort insists her heart has already made its decision. Here we get another flashback scene in the classroom with all 7 underclassmen, and we see Vor ask everyone a question. Why do they want to become a Keyblade master? Everyone seems to have an answer. Ericus has a sort of familial obligation, but wants to stop the darkness for good. Bragi wants to do what is good. Erd wants to learn and explore the worlds. Balder wants to protect what is important to him. Hermod agrees with them all, plus states that he wants to uphold the greater order. Xehanort states that he has his friends he wants to find, the one from his Union Cross dreams that he keeps having. And when it comes to Vor, she stammers, unsure of her reason before attempting to save face by saying, it's a secret, and she won't tell. When in fact, she is unsure of her reason for chasing this goal. And both the mirror and Vidar prey on that insecurity. Dejected, both Xehanort and Ericus leave the castle, and at this point, we are unsure of the status of the other upperclassmen or what Vidar's intentions or goals truly are. But you have to admit, his appearance did not come across as friendly. To close out episode 4, we flash forward 64 years in the same castle room with the all-knowing mirror. A dark portal opens up and out steps a more elderly Master Xehanort, the one we have become familiar with. He approaches the mirror and asks a question. Did his friends in his dreams ever exist, or were they just that, dreams? The mirror reveals to the elderly Master Xehanort that they did indeed exist, they do exist, and for some of them, currently, the bell has not yet tolled on their time. Xehanort asks the mirror if he knows any of their locations, and in cryptic poem, he tells Xehanort of a boy of tremendous light and darkness amongst an ocean of keys. We know this boy as Ventus, arriving in this time in the Keyblade graveyard via one of the Arc pods from the Daybreak Town basement. Xehanort recognizes this as the Keyblade graveyard and departs immediately, and this is our conclusion to episode 4. Remember when all of the characters from Union Cross traveled to the future in the Arc pods, one of the things you needed was like a waypoint, a person like expecting you there. And perhaps by Master Xehanort asking the magic mirror about the people he saw in his dreams, maybe that provided the waypoint for Ventus to arrive in this time for Master Xehanort to find. So we covered the first 4 episodes here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we did discover. Now, the earliest thing that we can point to is that Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, not only taught a young Xehanort how to time travel, but went back and set him on his path in the first place, creating this kind of like cyclical time loop that Ansem, Seeker of Darkness would have had to come back to send Xehanort on this path so that Xehanort would grow up to time travel into the future and have all this stuff happen. And yeah, it's a little bit confusing, but it seems like this had to have happened. And it happens because this is what's been written. Destiny, remember, Destiny is not supposed to be able to be altered. So the fact that this happens means that it was meant to happen. Now we get to see Master Xehanort amongst his peers, which is kind of interesting because we've seen a young Xehanort in the series before, and when we see him in like Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance and Kingdom Hearts 3, he's very aggressive, he's very cryptic, he's sarcastic sometimes, he's kind of a dick. And here, Xehanort is very pleasant with his friends. He doesn't like treat them as like inferior. He doesn't try to use them for like any plot or purpose. He's very amicable with his friends, and he seems to hold them in very high regard. So we can see that Xehanort was not always the evil. Not, evil's the wrong word. He was not always this person who walked in the darkness as he always was. He had these companions. He had these friends that had very strong bonds to his heart. So we'll have to see what happens to cause him to kind of go down this dark path of darkness. And based on the things that Master Odin has told us about the darkness, we kind of have a delineation between the two types. The types that occur naturally in a person's heart, and the true darkness that is like the ultimate foe of the Master of Masters that hasn't been seen in a long time. And from what we know, Xehanort eventually goes down this path where there is darkness in his heart, but his heart is strong enough to resist it, because Master Odin says that you can live. So if a heart is strong enough, it can live with darkness inside of its heart, which we've seen before from characters in the series, most notably Riku, who learns to accept that darkness as a part of him and even uses that darkness as a Keyblade wielder, fighting to protect the light. I mean, there's dark attacks rolled into his kit whenever you attack with him and stuff. So interesting delineation there between the like fabric of the darkness of this force that has been so present in Kingdom Hearts. We know much more about the darkness than we do about the light, because the light's like very established. And it's interesting that these negative emotions can cause darkness to manifest in a heart, because we literally have an enemy type that is manifested by negative emotions, which are the unversed. So are the unversed just like a precursor to the heartless? It makes for some interesting questions, some interesting theories in there. I don't know if that will ever get elaborated on. I don't know if I'm just kind of like shooting from the hip and just going to big brain mode, and maybe that's not like even important, but I think it's interesting to think about, considering that we're saying that a person's negative emotions can manifest as actual darkness when we have an enemy type that is manifested by negative emotions, which are the unversed. We know, or we can at least guess, that something happens to Xehanort's companions because of the flash forward that we see before he leaves on his journey before the Mark of Mastery exam. He's laying flowers on 4 gravestones as he leaves, and he'd only be doing this if these were his friends. So we can kind of guess here that Hermod, Erd, Vor, and Bragi have a grisly fate in store for them, and we're not exactly sure what that is, or why that is, or why this was chosen to be shown to us now. I mean, I guess it kind of does clear up the fact that, like I said at the top of the episode, these characters aren't present in the future Kingdom Hearts timeline, and I guess it would make sense for Xehanort's character development if he lost these friends that he really cared about, because think about what ends up happening between him and his last remaining friend, Ericus. They have this falling out over Xehanort's thirst for knowledge and his quest for Kingdom Hearts, and that's kind of like the final snap to send Xehanort down this dark path. So it makes sense for Xehanort's character development that he would lose these people that he cares about in this manner after seeing darkness out in the world. It's very, very interesting. Master Odin is, and speaking of Master Odin, if you didn't notice, a lot of these names are characters in Norse mythology. Bragi and Balder and Master Odin. Only Xehanort and Ericus have like the non-Norse mythology names. I'm not sure about all of them, but I would hesitate to guess. I guess I could just easily look it up, but I'm too stubborn. But just based on like Balder and Bragi and Vidar and all these other ones, I would have to guess that some of these are all based on Norse mythology, which wouldn't be the first time that Kingdom Hearts has kind of utilized mythology before in its lore. I mean, remember I explained to you about the Foretellers and the Master and Lushu, that all their names are derived from 7 deadly sins, which that's also an interesting comparison you could draw, because all the foretellers' names are derived from the seven deadly sins. And here we have a reveal that negative emotions establish darkness or grow darkness in the heart. And all these foretellers are named, all the apprentices of the master of masters are named after some of the most negative emotions, some of the seven deadly sins, right? Lust, greed, sloth, all that stuff. So there's an interesting connection there. I'm not sure if Nomura is starting to like play with those themes a little bit, but it ties into that delineation between like the true entities of darkness being the 13 prime darknesses and this naturally occurring darkness which appears naturally in people's hearts if they harbor this negative emotion too long. And as Xehanort's walking through the corridors in one of his like flashbacks when Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, sends him on his way, he talks about this type of darkness as like whispers in his head, right? It's whispers he feels, the emotions of like not just his own darkness, but the emotions of others. And you can kind of imagine that this is what it's essentially like the dark realm gives voice to your insecurities, to your fears, to your negative emotions. And this is what Master Aqua was going through when she was trapped in the realm of darkness. We see during her adventures in 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a Fragmentary Passage, that she has like these negative emotions of like doubt and fear and self-loathing and loneliness. And she's trapped down there for 10 years with all these emotions. Even the strongest heart with these self-doubts being whispered in her ear every single day would give in to those emotions and have their heart manifest as darkness, which it does, because when she emerges from the waters in the dark margin, she accuses Mickey of like leaving her behind, how lonely she's been. Like she has all this pent up aggression and rage and regret that's all kind of channeled towards King Mickey. So all these revelations for like the nature of darkness ties in pretty well with what has already been established in Kingdom Hearts, even though it's just kind of like a little bit retconny, a little bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but over the course of this series, as I get into uncharted territories now, it causes me to speculate a little bit more and maybe look at things more than I should. Maybe I'm like looking into things too much just because everything that Nomura has done so far has like, he's gone back and tied stuff together from like 10 years ago. So I don't know if I'm looking too deeply into stuff, but I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, right now we have an interesting development where we have found one of the upperclassmen. Vidar arrives and has kind of a confrontational conversation with Ericus and Xehanort, and even preys on Vor's insecurities to force her to come with him. And we don't really know what the upperclassmen are after, but it seems that they have willingly cut off communication from Master Odin. It seems they have willingly disappeared. It's not just something that like took them all out or like killed them all. They're acting in the worlds as a force working towards some kind of goal that has not yet been revealed to us. So either all the upperclassmen have fallen to darkness, or they are working toward, they decided that when they went out here for their trip before their Mark of Mastery exam to all work towards some kind of goal. And we're not really sure what that is yet. And we won't find out what that is yet until the next episode, because that is where we are going to bring this episode to a close. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It always means so much to me that you're willing to stop by and check out my ramblings on the world of Kingdom Hearts. This story is interesting because it adds a lot of little details to the already established world and lore. If you really start to like dig down and analyze the lore at like a granular level, this story really kind of adds a lot of interesting things regarding like the nature of worlds and darkness. And if a world is ruled by a dark person, but that person maintains that world's order, is that necessarily a bad thing? And do Keyblade wielders have a responsibility to like knock that person off if they're like maintaining the world's order and like holding that world together? So there's interesting philosophical questions in there that we've kind of hinted at before, but really kind of manifest themselves here. and represent just some of the challenges that Keyblade wielders acting in the world would have to experience. And this is probably why you would want your upperclassmen to go out into the world and experience these things, so they have a frame of reference for when they come across problems, complicated problems like this that they have to solve. But in part 2, we'll deal with the episodes that are remaining, so episodes 5 through 8, and we'll talk about the prologue, and we'll tie all that stuff into Master Xehanort as a person, and we'll see if any of that information ties into the future of the series, and maybe we'll see if Lushu's lurking around anywhere, what he's up to. But for now, we're going to close the episode off here. Thank you guys so much for listening. It always warms my heart that you come and listen to me ramble about stupid Kingdom Hearts stuff. It's really, really great. I really, really do appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with me or experience more of the show, the easiest way to do that is to go to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. A bunch of links to different music platforms are there where you can go and listen to the podcast. I think I have Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music up there is like 3 of the big ones, but the show is available anywhere that you choose to listen to it, to your podcatcher of choice. All my social media links are there. You can follow the show on Instagram. You can follow me on Blue Sky. You can join our Discord server, which is pretty light in terms of like what a Discord server is. So if you just want to be in a Discord server that you don't have to like chain yourself to, my server is the perfect one, because I usually just use it for like show announcements and just recruit people to be on the show. So, but there's some interesting conversation in there, and there's some interesting individuals in there who also make podcasts about video games, and sometimes there's some good discussion in there. So check it out. And you can also go and check out the Unlockables Patreon, and I have 2 tiers. There's a $1 tier if you just want to support and help out a friend and give a show you really like a little bit of extra support. There aren't really too many extras about that. And the $1 tier is really if you just don't care about extra content. I make some extra content. I have some extra voting and stuff like that. But if you just want to like support without any strings attached or anything like that, there's the $1 tier, or there's a $3 tier that gets some interesting extra goodies. I try to do some extra vlogs or some extra mini episodes to post to the Patreon if you do support at the $3 level. And anybody at the $3 level can also participate in any poll that I choose when it comes to like playing a video game, whether it's like a community game of the month or just like, hey, what's the next game I should play off my backlog, and do an episode about it. Stuff like that. You can get voting privileges. Of course, you don't have to support the show on Patreon at all. Everything that you know and love in the main feed always will remain free, including things like Guiding Keys, The Story of Kingdom Hearts. The stuff that I work on primarily will always be free. My mini-series, the stuff I put my most work into. The Patreon just has some like extra like 10, 15-minute long stuff of things that maybe I'd like to talk about, but I don't see any room on the show for them. So if you do support on Patreon, I'm eternally grateful. I really appreciate it. But if you're just a silent listener and you just want a show that you can listen to every once in a while with no strings attached, that's why I'm here too. So I also appreciate if you're that type of listener. But with that being said, it's time to sign off. As always, remember, it's not just the story of video games, it's the story of you. And may your heart be your guiding key.